Hello there and welcome to the briefing room. I'm ABC News political director Rick Klein in our Washington newsroom, and it is the day after the first presidential debate. The dust has settled, but man, there are some dust-ups still being worked out. The big news from last night, of course, Kamala Harris going right after Joe Biden, the former vice president, getting the most direct attacks so far of his campaign. And a few minutes ago, the former vice president, Joe Biden, as you see on stage right now, a few minutes ago, Vice President Biden addressed the dust-up that happened on that stage. And it looked like he was trying to clarify some of the comments that he made in response to Senator Harris. Take a look.
Well, look, before I start, I'd like to say something about the debate we had last night. And I heard and I listened to and I respect Senator Harris. But, you know, we all know that 30 seconds to 60 seconds on a campaign debate exchange can't do justice to a lifetime committed to civil rights. I want to be absolutely clear about my record and position on racial justice, including busing. I never, ever opposed voluntary busing. And as a program that Senator Harris participated in, and it made a difference in her life. I did support federal action to address root causes of segregation in our schools and our communities, including taking on the banks and redlining and trying to change the way in which neighborhoods were segregated.
An uncomfortable exchange last night in an attempt by the former vice president to clean it up today. A lot of spin going on in the wake of the debate. And we have some numbers with us today. Our friends at 538 have partnered with Morning Consult to do some polling, online polling, pre and post debate. And our good friend Julia Wolf joining us now from 538 to give us some of the highlights of the winners and the losers. Julia, let's start with the big winner last night. I think the consensus was Kamala Harris.
Yeah.
What do the numbers show us?
I think you're exactly right. Kamala Harris was the clear winner. Normally I have to sort of hedge how I say these things, but looking at what the numbers show us, it's pretty evident. We worked with our friends at Morning Consult to poll Democrats both before and after the debates, and what we saw there was that she was agreed upon by 35%, the highest of any, to be the best performer of the night. Pretty far ahead from Joe Biden, who was only at 19%, and he should have been much higher given his favorabilities going into the night.
So to be clear, you were polling people before and after to try to track movement. So what does it mean when you see someone like Kamala Harris as a quote-unquote winner?
Right. So often there's a ton of polls after the debate to see how did people think they performed. What's special about this poll that we did was we actually wanted to say, okay, but who do you support going in? Because that really shows us a meaningful difference if we can see people actually change their mind from the debate. And again, we saw that with Kamala Harris. She picked up quite a few people. Joe Biden actually lost a lot of people. So that really makes this a much better metric because we keep track of who you supported when you watched.
Okay, so let's talk about who lost the most ground. We know who's doing the spinning today. We know who the brunt of the attacks was. What did the numbers show us about Vice President Biden?
So, as I mentioned, Biden didn't do great in terms of how people thought he performed in the debate or whether or not he did well. But an important caveat to that, and something that gives the vice president some bolstering, is his favorability numbers didn't really shift. So those are the kinds of things you can definitely bounce back from, with a couple of good weeks on the trail. Somebody who did have sort of a definite bad night, Marianne Williamson, she brought up her name recognition, which is great, but a lot of that came from raising her unfavorable numbers. She saw about a 17-point jump in unfavorability.
So people seeing her and hearing about her for the wrong reasons. Let's talk about name ID, because that was the name of the game for a whole lot of candidates on the stage. Maybe not the focus of the headline, certainly not the focus of the moderators or of the buzz going in. What did we see with some of the other contenders out there, thinking about the Eric Swalwells, the Andrew Yangs, the Michael Bennetts?
Yeah, so we did see a pretty substantial increase for a lot of those folks. Bennett, Swalwell, even Yang, even though he didn't get a ton of time to speak, you watched sort of his favorabilities go up, his unfavorables a little bit, not too much, but that just means more people now know his name. So being on the debate stage for those candidates, even those who didn't get to speak a ton, clearly had a pretty big impact in reaching more voters.
All right. Thank you to Julia Wolf, bringing us those fresh numbers and the fallout from all of it. And as we mentioned, Kamala Harris enjoying a moment. And one of those rare things you get in a campaign when everyone decides you're the winner. It means a whole lot of attention for her candidacy right now. She spent part of her morning in Homestead, Florida, where many of her colleagues and former or fellow contenders have been visiting. And she is now headed off to her hometown of San Francisco, where our Zoreen Shah is on the way. Zoreen?
I'm Zoreen Shah in Los Angeles. Last night, I was at a Kamala Harris watch party in East LA. There were about 20 supporters there. And as soon as she had her interaction with Joe Biden, that room was quiet. They were watching closely. And as soon as the cameras went on Joe Biden, that room erupted with applause and cheers. Many people said they were not surprised, but they were relieved that other people around the country were finally seeing what they say they've seen in Harris this whole time. Some people said they were dumbfounded. Other people said that she took him to court. Now, her campaign says that she had the third best fundraising day yesterday since she started this campaign. Right now, I am headed to San Francisco, where she's going to be partaking in the Gay Pride Parade this weekend. I'll have more for you from there. But right now, I'm Zoreen Shah for ABC News.
And our thanks to Zoreen. It's going to be an interesting couple of days with Kamala Harris headed there. She talks about her own background, and she is going to be right there in her hometown for a couple of days. Well, we want to bring you the exchange that got all of the buzz, to go into it a bit of a larger discussion. Take a look at what transpired last night between Kamala Harris and Joe Biden.
And I'm going to now direct this at Vice President Biden. I do not believe you are a racist. And I agree with you when you commit yourself to the importance of finding common ground. But I also believe, and it's personal, and I was actually it was hurtful to hear you talk about the reputations of two United States senators who built their reputations and career on the segregation of race in this country. And it was not only that, but you also worked with them to oppose busing. And, you know, there was a little girl in California who was part of the second class to integrate her public schools. And she was bused to school every day. And that little girl was me. So I will tell you that on this subject, it cannot be an intellectual debate among Democrats. We have to take it seriously. We have to act swiftly.
It's a mischaracterization of my position across the board. I did not praise racist. That is not true, number one. Number two, if we want to have this campaign litigated on who supports civil rights and whether I did or not, I'm happy to do that.
Vice President Biden, do you agree today that you were wrong to oppose busing in America then?
No.
Do you agree?
I did not oppose busing in America. What I opposed is busing ordered by the Department of Education. That's what I opposed.
Well, there was a failure of states to integrate public schools in America. I was part of the second class to integrate Berkeley, California public schools almost 2 decades after Brown v. Board of Education.
Because your city council made that decision. It was a local decision.
So that's where the federal government must step in. That's why we have the Voting Rights Act and the Civil Rights Act. That's why we need to pass the Equality Act. That's why we need to pass the ERA, because there are moments in history where states fail to preserve the civil rights of all people.
I have supported the ERA.
And in the glimpse of campaign strategy, look at the tweet that Senator Harris's campaign sent out while the debate was ongoing, a picture of Senator Harris as a youngster, part of the busing program that was happening in her then hometown of Berkeley, California. We want to bring this conversation back to the present day a bit, rather than talking about busing in the 1970s, talking in very real terms about the issues of integration and segregation in today's public schools. Iman Abdul joins us now, a student who works with Integrate NYC. And Iman, tell us, from your perspective, why this is still relevant. It's been a long time since court-ordered busing was an issue. In fact, it isn't even legal from a federal perspective any longer. But why are the issues that we heard from Senator Harris and Vice President Biden last night still relevant?
Yeah, so they're still relevant because segregation is still happening in our city today. And so New York City actually being the most segregated city in the entire country, we're still seeing high rises in segregation in our schools. And so busing is also not necessarily the solution to this issue, and it's because we have to really look at the definition of integration. How do we define that? Is integration just literally like physically moving Black and brown bodies into predominantly white spaces and calling that, oh, integration? Or is it actually looking at how is this school segregated? And so actually at the nonprofit that I work for, Integrate NYC, we have developed a 5R platform that says these are the 5 ways we are segregated, and these are the 5 ways that we need to work together to create an integrated space. And so that would not only be through race and enrollment policies, right, which is the first one, but it'll also be through resources, right? Which schools are being resourced? Are they the Black and brown schools, or are they the white schools? Which schools have relationships, healthy relationships, right? Student-to-student relationship, teacher-to-student relationships, any form of relationship in the school setting, but also in terms of our curriculum, are we learning about ourselves? Is our curriculum culturally relevant? As well as restorative justice. Are our Black and brown students walking through metal detectors every single day? How many Black and brown students are being suspended compared to white and Asian students? And as well as looking at representation. Do our teachers look like us in the classroom? Are they predominantly white? Are they predominantly teachers of color? And so really looking at integration as a whole, not just busing and moving bodies into different locations saying, oh, this is how we're going to achieve integration, but it's a much more deeper understanding as to how are we going to address this issue and actually take it into our own hands from a federal and local level.
So, Iman, I want to talk about the federal level in particular that you bring up. It was an item that Senator Harris brought to Vice President Biden. He tried to draw a distinction. He was on the record being against federally court-mandated or federal agency-mandated busing in the 1970s. It was a big issue in his home state of Delaware as well as many other places. He tried to draw that distinction and say, I was never against busing because if your community decided they wanted to do busing, that would have been fine. Is that a meaningful distinction? And does he understand the role of the federal government in segregation today, in your view, based on that comment?
Yeah. Clearly not, right? If opposing busing is like not it, but I also am not for busing. Like busing is a very short-term way to get to the solution. It's like, okay, we're gonna just physically move these bodies. And so that's not how we're going to actually achieve integration. And it's a very old school way. And so I believe that like, if every single young person was given the opportunity to choose what type of school they want to go to with their families, it shouldn't be like, oh, I live in this neighborhood and this school isn't good, right? Every single school in our city and in our country should be equitable. And so if the city does not ensure that every single school is equitable, then that has to come from a federal perspective and federal enforcement. Because throughout history, we've seen that all of these states are still promoting segregation, right? There's no school in this entire country that has successfully integrated students. And today, we see that more than ever in New York City, right? You can have a school in the Bronx that's predominantly Black and Latino, and you take a little trip down to Brooklyn and you have a school that's predominantly white. And are we going to keep busing our students and moving bodies to say, oh, this school is better than this one, let's put them here? But it's actually like, no, if our city is not ensuring that every single school is equitable and just, then it has to come from the federal government.
So if it's not busing, Iman, what is it? What is the issue that tells you, yes, a presidential candidate gets it from your perspective, understands your mission and what you're trying to overcome in New York City, or doesn't get it?
Busing, I personally don't think busing is the solution. It's actually implementing policies, ensuring that every single young person has access to a full fare Metro card. There are still students in the city that are not receiving full fare Metro cards, and that's an injustice because what if students need to actually travel far or need to take a bus? And so busing helps to an extent, but that's not full integration, right? It's also ensuring that resources in every single school are equitable. It's ensuring that relationships and culturally relevant pedagogy is healthy and is there in every single school, right? It's ensuring that we have more guidance counselors and therapists in our school than we have NYPD in our school. It's ensuring that our teachers represent the student demographics of the city rather than, all of like predominantly white teachers, right? And so in New York City, what's interesting is that 83% of our students are students of color, but only 39% of our teachers are. And so really looking into integration as more than just busing, more than just transportation, but actually ensuring that every single school in all neighborhoods are equitable, and that any student from any area in the city is allowed to attend the school that them and their family chooses.
All right, Iman Abdul joining us from Integrate NYC, a junior at City College of New York. We appreciate you spending some time with us to explore this important issue in the wake of last night's debate. Thanks so much. And as we talked about last night's debate, I want to bring in Catherine Faulders, one of our White House reporters, to this discussion because the president said he was bored by the debates, although he did offer a tweet out of last night's in particular. When all those hands went up, you had every one of the candidates on stage say that they wanted to offer health insurance to undocumented immigrants. He said that basically the race is over as a result of that.
Exactly.
But in the overnight hours, just hours afterward, he continues this trip with the G20 where he had kind of an interesting meeting on tap.
He did. He met with the Russian President Vladimir Putin, and I think what was significant, at least out of the portion of the meeting that the cameras saw, reporters asked, are you going to tell Russia not to meddle in our election again? And he said, it seemed in a joking way, don't meddle. Oh, you want to play it right here? Okay.
Let's play it, yeah. So kind of wagging his finger there a little bit at the Russian president. But look, the president's own national security team has said that Russia could try and meddle in our election again in 2020. And he seemed to be a little bit all smiles there. You remember when he was leaving the White House South Lawn the other day, a reporter asked him, are you going to bring this up with the Russian president? He said, this is none of your business. So it still remains to be seen what he said to him behind closed doors. Yeah, you think an actual confrontation isn't just that, isn't just with a little bit of a smirk there. Let's talk about fake news as well, because that's another issue where it seems like President Putin and President Trump see eye to eye.
Yeah, and we hear, obviously, the term fake news from this president all the time. He likes to tweet about it. He likes to say it to us. But what's significant here is that he made this comment that was captured by the Russian television stations. The U.S. TV travel pool didn't capture it. But in front of Vladimir Putin, who has had a big problem with violence against journalists since he took office in 2000. The Committee to Protect Journalists says that 28 journalists have been killed from 2000 to 2019. So obviously not a great comment that he made. Some outlets also heard him say, well, we didn't capture this, but heard the president tell Putin, quote, get rid of them. So obviously raising some red flags over there.
Yeah, indeed. All right, Catherine Faulders, our thanks to you. And kind of a side note to all of this, we heard from former President Jimmy Carter on a related subject just today. Take a listen.
There's no doubt that the Russians did interfere in the election, and I think the interference, although not yet quantified, if fully investigated, would show that Trump didn't actually win the election in 2016. He lost the election, and he was put into office because the Russians interfered on his behalf.
So do you believe President Trump is an illegitimate president?
Based on what I just said, which I can't retract, I'll tell you.
It's interesting to me, in part because Jimmy Carter in the past has said the media was not being fair to President Trump. We'll see if President Trump responds at all to former President Carter. We're joined now by Ann Flaherty, who covers immigration and similar federal agencies and federal issues for us here at ABC News, because it has been a big week throughout Washington, throughout the border region on the immigration beat, a whole lot of moving pieces. And we heard earlier today from the acting Homeland Security Secretary about the role that he views as media coverage of playing into the current perception of a crisis. Take a listen.
For months, I and other leaders at DHS have been warning of increasing numbers of families and children arriving at our border, and the fact that our facilities are not appropriate for them, that we needed congressional action to address the factors driving the crisis and ensuring safe conditions.
So, Ann, you've been doing a lot of the reporting on this. What brought it to a head in the last couple of days? Why did we suddenly see these images and suddenly see this intense focus?
Well, I think what we saw for the first time this week was an image of a father who had drowned with his daughter. We know that this has been happening. Actually, Secretary McAleenan mentioned this is the fourth child's death in 1 week, but this is the first time that we had a photograph, and I think that really hit home with a lot of people. One thing that he said in that clip that I found really interesting was that he was saying, I've been talking about this for a long time. He has. He's gone before the hill. He talks about this at length with reporters. But if you note, the president declared an emergency in February to build his border wall. He has not declared an emergency a national emergency to send more money for humanitarian issues.
Yeah, we saw Congress wrapped up in that as the week went on. Stick around, but we want to bring you a package that our colleague Quinn Owen put together. We've heard so much about these dangerous border crossings, migrant families. Quinn spent some time following an asylum seeker all the way up to El Paso.
We're walking up now to the Paso del Norte Bridge, where the Bishop of El Paso behind me, joined hand in hand with a family returned to Mexico, is going to attempt to make another crossing. Facing health issues and concerns about their safety, they're going to make another attempt to present to U.S. immigration officials.
This government and this society are not well. We suffer from a life-threatening case of hardening of the heart.
This is the line to get back into the United States. We just paid the bridge toll here, and we're about to walk across. The bishop right behind me here. He's joined by a family that was sent back to Mexico under the administration's migrant protection protocols. They have outlined that migrants who, even those who apply at a legal port of entry like the one in El Paso, have to be sent back to wait out the duration of their asylum claim.
As we were making our way from Ciudad Juarez to El Paso, we were stopped right in the middle of the bridge, which isn't normal operating procedure. The bishop was going to try to explain to CBP that this family and this young man qualify under stipulation that they do not remain in Mexico while waiting for their asylum proceedings. They get to wait in the United States because of their situation.
I just heard the agent say that according to their particular protocols, they're not ordinarily supposed to allow families to come back this way. But they got word from higher up that this family or these people had permission to pass. Today, somebody listened.
It's unclear what's become of that family. They were taken into an office in the building behind me for an asylum interview where they'll assess the fear they have of returning to Ciudad Juarez, and asylum officers will then make a decision about whether or not they can stay in the U.S. or have to be returned to Mexico to wait out the duration of their asylum claim. I spoke to one of the lawyers who said they're not exactly sure what that outcome will be, but they did get another chance at it yesterday when we walked across the bridge. For ABC News Live, I'm Quinn Owen in El Paso, Texas, on the border.
And our thanks to Quinn for bringing us that important reporting. And there's been a week of extraordinary images. You referenced that picture that I think is seared in all of our consciousness now. We saw it drive the political discussion, and we saw the House of Representatives, after a whole lot of political hand-wringing, decide to pass a Senate-passed bill that would provide relief aid to the border. What is the view of how quickly the money gets there and how quickly it can make a difference in the living conditions of so many of these children and these families?
You know, Rick, I think what is rather sad about this story is this is just going to keep everybody afloat. It's going to keep the lights on. For example, HHS, which runs shelters scattered across the United States, they have something like 13,000 kids in these shelters. These are unaccompanied minors who are hoping to link up with sponsors already living in the United States. They needed $2.9 billion just to keep the shelters running and to keep paying the workers there. This is not probably going to do much, if anything, for the people who are at the border. And that clip that we just saw, that really speaks to some of the issues that these people are dealing with. A lot of them, including the father that we saw the image from, our understanding from local reporters is that they tried to present legally at the port of entry and could not put in their asylum claim. So they had been waiting for months and had grown desperate, according to reports.
It is it's sad all around, and whatever Washington can do to make it better, it doesn't sound like it can happen that quickly.
Right. Everybody is just so polarized, they can't decide where to go next.
All right, Ann Flaherty, our thanks to you. And thank you to you all. That does it for this edition of The Briefing Room on this Friday. Check out the ABC News app, and we'll be back on Monday with another edition of The Briefing Room.
Hi, everyone. George Stephanopoulos here. Thanks for checking out the ABC News YouTube channel. If you'd like to get more videos, show highlights, and watch live event coverage, click on the right over here to subscribe to our channel. And don't forget to download the ABC News app for breaking news alerts. Thanks for watching.